Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats as we begin today's event. It is our pleasure to welcome you to Building the I-90 Semiconductor Workforce, leveraging existing assets to support growth and create jobs. To kick off today's program, please welcome David Van Slyke, Dean of the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University.
Good morning, and welcome to Syracuse University. I want to extend a warm welcome to both our in-person guests here at the National Veterans Resource Center and those of you joining us virtually. Before we begin, Syracuse University would like to acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral land Syracuse University now stands. It's a privilege for our university to host today's discussion on workforce development and the semiconductor industry. We're pleased to welcome the Center for Strategic and International Studies and the National Institute for Industry and Career Advancement for what promises to be an insightful and forward-looking conversation. Today's event builds on an important dialogue that began during the September 2023 CSIS forum in Washington, D.C., where national leaders gathered to tackle the challenges of scaling the skilled semiconductor workforce. NIICA shared a national strategy to strengthen the talent pipeline, one that we see playing out around the nation and right here in New York. Much has transpired since then, both nationally and in our backyard. As investment in semiconductor manufacturing grows, so does the need for a well-prepared workforce. This is a defining moment for workforce development, and today's conversation is about ensuring that we are not only keeping pace, but leading the way. Syracuse University is deeply invested in this effort, working with regional partners to develop programs that help build a workforce with the required skills to meet the moment. We recognize the strategic importance of a semiconductor industry, not just as an economic driver, but as a key sector for national security and technological innovation. Micron's 2022 announcement of their Clay, New York megafab, promising 9,000 direct and 40,000 supporting jobs, spurred Syracuse University, Center State CEO, and Micron to form the Future Ready Workforce Development Consortium. This consortium focuses on building both construction and technician pipelines, connecting education, training, and apprenticeships to meet Micron's workforce needs. Syracuse University is committed to this effort, investing resources to support Micron and the broader semiconductor sector. Syracuse University's Daniello Institute for Veterans and Military Families has strategically partnered with Micron to create a dedicated career pathway for transitioning veterans. This initiative leverages the success of the Onward to Opportunity program, which has provided vital support for more than 100,000 veterans and military-connected family members. By prioritizing veteran access to semiconductor careers, the IVMF is not only strengthening the industry, but also providing a replicable model for expanding opportunities to diverse communities. Syracuse University is proud to host today's discussion on strategies for leveraging existing resources and programs that will create New York's semiconductor workforce and transform the I-90 corridor into a nationally recognized tech hub. Collectively, we explore how the Syracuse region and greater I-90 corridor is effectively engaging employers, educational institutions, and regional stakeholders to prepare the region for growth in the semiconductor industry and helping to inform similar efforts nationally. This event is an important opportunity to assess where we are today and how we can work together to build the workforce needed for tomorrow. We're grateful for CSIS and NIICA for convening this discussion, and I look forward to the insights from our distinguished speakers. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sujay Shivakumar, a senior fellow and the Director of Renewing American Innovation at CSIS. Sujay?
Good morning. So thank you for joining us today at this workshop on building the I-90 Semiconductor Workforce. As was introduced, my name is Sujay Shivakumar. I'm a senior fellow at CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the nation's preeminent national security think tank based in Washington. I direct the Renewing American Innovation Program at CSIS, which champions policies and programs needed to restore and revitalize the nation's innovation system, which critically includes the workforce and the manufacturing as key subsystems of that innovation system. I don't have to explain to you why it's wonderful to be out of Washington today and to be in Syracuse. I particularly want to thank the Dean for his warm welcome and for his hospitality here at Syracuse University. You know, think tanks and universities both have a really vital role to play in the development of sound public policy. And it's for this reason that CSIS and the Maxwell School have long formed a unique partnership to develop joint programs and activities, and it's really wonderful to be here in that spirit today. As the nation's effort to reshore semiconductor manufacturing gains traction, attention is turning more and more to where the action is today, which is in the regions. So today's event brings together federal, New York State, and local leaders, industry representatives, educators, workforce development practitioners, all together in this really impressive facility. I'm particularly delighted to welcome our congressional representatives as well as the county executive and other senior leaders to our discussion here today. Our aim is to outline practical and real-time strategies for scaling semiconductor workforce development efforts. You know, when we are in the process of reshoring manufacturing, the fulcrum, the pivotal point now is how do we actually get the workforce moving? Because without the workforce, nothing else will take place. So this requires that we ensure timely alignment of education, industry, and government investments in very short order. Indeed, this meeting, as was alluded to, is the second that we have collaborated with NIICA, the National Institute for Industry and Career Advancement. The first live-streamed event was held at CSIS headquarters in Washington on solving the chip workforce crunch. And I think that not only was there a room, an audience in the room, but I think we had attracted nearly 4,000 views online. So clearly this is an issue of some salience and resonance and deep interest. So our focus today is on leveraging existing resources and programs to strengthen New York's semiconductor workforce. We will explore how the Syracuse region and the broader I-90 corridor are effectively engaging employers, educational institutions, regional stakeholders to ensure the region's economic revitalization and the revival of advanced manufacturing in this region and across the United States. I think what's really important is that what's happening here is a very important model for what's happening nationally. It is not only important for the local economy, but it's also important because this is where the action is really taking place. The CHIPS and Science Act has moved a lot of the activities now at the regional level. It's up to folks like the people who will be in the next panel who actually will make a lot of this happen. And how you make this happen, how you sort out your challenges of working together across universities, community colleges, state government, and other industry, educational community colleges will serve as a template for how the rest of the country will also follow in this example. And it's also important nationally for that reason, and it's also important internationally because our rebirth, our renewal as a manufacturing nation will depend on how local communities like this solve these very challenging problems of working together. So I think one of the reasons why a national security think tank like CSIS is taking a deep interest in what's happening in New York, in the I-90 corridor, in Syracuse, is because this has relevance for economic growth regionally, for our economic revitalization nationally, and as well as for our national competitiveness and our national security interests internationally. So in developing this workshop, finally, it's been really our honor and pleasure to work with Mike Russo, who's the president and CEO of NIICA. Mike combines deep knowledge of the region and the semiconductor industry, and really a passion for renewing New York manufacturing and innovation system. He's covered the ground. He has led the government relations and regulatory affairs at Global Foundries. He later served as a vice president of industry and advancement at SEMI. He has served as a government relations. He served on the private side with Global Foundries. He has served as the U.S. Labor Secretary's Advisory Committee on Apprenticeships, and he has helped negotiate one of the largest private sector project labor agreements in history to build a major fab in Malta, New York. So I should add, his work at Global Foundries also included negotiating a landmark national security agreement to ensure the company could meet critical defense technology needs while securing CFIUS approval to acquire IBM's microelectronics division. So in short, you have somebody who is perhaps overqualified and uniquely positioned to take a lot of this activity forward. So please join me in welcoming Mike Russo.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As Sujay mentioned, our first discussion talking about a national strategy was September of 23. As far as public, we've been spending time all over the country helping to plant seeds so people would understand what a playbook would look like, what infrastructure is available, determine what support they need to fill gaps, et cetera. So we were talking about doing an update. The reason why we selected New York State, in particular the I-90 corridor, and here in particular to host it, was because of the great work that's been done by the local community, beginning, I mean, Sujay mentioned Global Foundries, but if you think about the investments made in New York State, they began in the early 90s. And it didn't make any difference what administration was in place, but they continued those investments. The first investments were made at State University of New York. I'm looking out at Mike Frame right now, who's followed some of that investment to where he is today in Mackney, as an example. But there's something to be said for the long view, continued investments, putting whatever, maybe a little personal opinions aside, but looking at what's good for the state. We're going to provide a national perspective of that. The work being done here in New York is really a model of what could be done and should be done around the country. There's a lot of great work because we do have relationships with people around the country. We work around the country. So a lot of great work going on in regions all over the U.S. However, New York State and what you're doing here, many could learn from. And that's why we're here today, to shine a bright light on what you're doing, to help others to learn from what you're doing, and to really send messages to policymakers and those looking to invest here in the state and in the nation on what to really look for to help to scale and sustain these types of investments. I'd like to just thank a few people before we get started. So Congressman Mannion and Tonko are here. Claudia Tenney, Representative Tenney, had a lot to do with working with Ryan in the county, et cetera, and all your stakeholders. She couldn't be here today, but also just extending a thank you. The Office of Senator Schumer, Center State CEO, facilitative lead on the ground, Mackney. I can't say enough about Mackney. Mackney actually, we approached Randy about potentially expanding the reach of registered apprenticeships into semiconductor, et cetera, years ago. And they're a contractor of ours. They were doing great work before then. They're doing more great work now. It's really amazing the amount of work that they've done. Between Center State CEO and Mackney in this region, there's a lot to learn, but great work. Hope Knight, Empire State Development Team, you're really looking at the nature of state investments, state support for these types of enterprises is super important. And again, it's really come through administrations for quite some time, a couple of decades now. Onondaga County Executive Ryan McMahon, the Griffiths Institute is with us today. Monroe County Community College, Mohawk Valley Community College, Hudson Valley Community College, Onondaga County Community College, Capital Region BOCES, the MCC Economic and Workforce Development Center, Indium, Micron, and Wolfspeed are here. our Future Ready Workforce Innovation Consortium. Now, I'm always worried about mentioning people, but I never do that because you always forget somebody. But because of the importance of this today, and I think we have a pretty good list, thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule. And if I missed anybody, I'm really sorry. So, also I'd like to thank the Syracuse team, the production team. They've been great to work with. We did 9 of these events last year all over the country. They've done a great job. Stephanie Frederick is our Director of Communications and Public Relations. She really is the center of all this. Hats off to Stephanie and Jesus Cabrero, who's worked with her on the technology aspect. But also, I want to let you know that we have 5 people now staffing New York State. We have 5 staff. So we have high level of subject matter expertise to support all of this work. So we have human resource specialists, talent acquisition specialists, specialists on workforce development programming, technical training, registered apprenticeships, et cetera. And they all, I'm just going to call them out by name. They're here today, in case you want to grab them and wrestle them to the side at some point. But we're not here, this is not competitive. We're here to support your work as you see fit, right? That's important to state. So Clay Nagel is our Director for Center of Skills-Based Learning. If you just raise your hand, Clay. Also, we have Martha Ponji. She's our director. Actually, Martha's not part of our New York. She's our Director of National Apprenticeships. She has a bigger portfolio. You all know Martha. She's from Syracuse, now in New Jersey. Now, I don't know if I should have said that, Martha. Robert Wyman, he's our Director of Workforce Innovation. Lori Ferguson, she's really our programmatic lead. And Chloe Thornton, she's handles data analytics and reporting. And Liz Lorenz, Elizabeth, she handles all of our registered apprenticeships and workforce programming. And Jesus, he's our full stack developer for the work that we're doing here in New York State for a platform. But what I'd like to do, I'm going to jump into a presentation now to talk a little bit about what a national strategy looks like. And I think when you see it, you're going to say, yeah, we're doing some things really right here. And this came out before you were doing your work, right? You're also going to maybe learn some things through our discussions today. So, this looks like a bomb detonator or not. I'm really... Okay. I'd like to switch to here, but anyway. So I'm just briefly our mission. So we're a 501c3. Our mission is to ensure the development of the talent pipeline in the nation to support strategic industry sectors, tech-based industries, and advanced manufacturing tied to national security and global competitiveness. So you can understand why, why we're here today is to talk about that national strategy. So we're going to talk about where we've come since our last convening, review that strategy, regional considerations, and infrastructure and observations. And maybe they could switch that over to this monitor would be great. If you look at the activity that's happened since 2020, projected through now, and this is not all encompassing, this is just an idea of the scale of investments. Many of you know because you're involved in it, but it's good to take a step back from what you do daily just to look at the scale. And billions of dollars in strategic industry sectors, developing supply chains, R&D, components of it, our workforce, et cetera. We're going to have some great panelists here today to talk about what some of that investment looks like. When you look at New York State, sizable investments, and you notice it doesn't include everything. Like we mentioned Global Foundries earlier. That's going to be up to a $20 billion investment. The seeds were planted years ago. IBM, which is now on Semiconductor, was Global Foundries for a while. There's other investments. This is, again, a quick snapshot, not intended to be all-encompassing, to demonstrate what the investments are in New York at the same time frame. This is a snapshot of the work that we're doing nationally, okay? And again, people sometimes say, well, we really want to invest locally. Do we work with an outside entity kind of thing? That's not what we do. We help share information, help people to understand what strategy should look like. We provide subject matter expertise where needed, infrastructure, et cetera. But what's telling, it'll also give you a reason why we're here today. Look at New York. And quite frankly, it's not only the training providers, the employers, the state involvement, et cetera, but the infrastructure and the programmatic support we're providing nationally was developed here in New York. So that means there are entities. I see Bob Gear here I don't know if it's New York, I think it's New York Creates now, right? He'll give me a thumbs up or thumb down. I forget what you're called now, right, Bob, which hat you're wearing. But he'll be able to talk about his journey through that a little later. This is actually what those numbers look like. So in our last convening, we were in 17 states. We have 59 employers engaged. Talking about apprentices, we had 2,071 committed, and we had 43 community colleges in our network. We've since actually formalized a network. It's called the Semiconductor and Industry Network of Colleges. It's really training providers and colleges that provide related technical instruction. All their curriculum are aligned with KSAs for employers, et cetera, all in the National Talent Hub, which also helps to support pathway development in states. Look at where we are today nationally as compared to where we were in 23, and then look at New York State. And I'm going to give another shout out. I don't know if Randy's here today, but I will give another shout out to MACNY. Their work through the Center for Economic Growth, CEG, and our TMA, and through MACNY, they are at the heart of much of that work. So they've been great, and that's what we do, by the way. We work with local intermediaries. If we need to establish intermediaries, we'll do that. If we need to establish programs with employers, we do that. When you have a more sophisticated, mature entity, we try to light that on fire. So that's the model. On the national strategy, there's several components that, and I'm not going to go into detail on what these are, but these are just high level. Making sure that that we build a broader pipeline of skills that are transferable, foundational across like industry sectors is so important. If you think about what it takes to get out in front of a Global Foundries investment or a Micron investment or an Intel or a TSMC investment, you have to build an entire ecosystem. Semiconductor is very cyclical in nature, by the way. And the first people that are impacted are technicians. And if we build the skills right in a system that allows them to receive credit, small c credit, and be able to leverage what they've learned from one employer to the next, we're building a pipeline that supports the entire supply chain and all size manufacturers. Super important. You can't make a big investment, turn on the big investment, and deplete the whole supply chain and forget about other size employers. So very important. And making sure skills-based learning is really integrated into public education. One of the things that we help a lot of states, like what we're doing here, is you're leveraging that and developing programs. But many cases, not talking about this region in particular, it's piecemeal. How do you do that at scale so the entire education system automatically provides that? And that's an important component. And leveraging technology to help to scale and sustain programs. What do those platforms look like? To connect those individuals to jobs. Oftentimes, it's difficult to have enough throughput in college, and it's difficult, or training institution, and it's difficult time to actually make the connections. And getting absolutely more people in the pipeline is usually a difficult lift. And the reason why a national strategy is important is that it really takes the heavy lift, the longer term items off the local regions, right? So understanding what the strategy is and providing infrastructure that may take years and millions of dollars to develop that can be leveraged by regions is why that's very important. More efficient, more effective. National strategies really provide that infrastructure, programs linked to industry requirements. A lot of that's being done right now in the region. And mechanisms to scale. So attracting more people, developing that pipeline, connecting them to industry, and then really make sure that we support long-term initiatives. The fundamental pillars, that you check the boxes, right? Not telling you anything you don't know. Effective local ecosystem building. Making sure that there's infrastructure in place so the regions that require those long-term investments can be focused on that outreach and engagement. That skills-based learning component and the ability to scale. On the effective local ecosystem building, those employers, think of Micron and how they've stepped up to build collaborations working with Syracuse University, with Onondaga Community College, with the role of MACNY and Center State CEO, et cetera. So important. You can't do this externally. That has to be done in regions, and you are a prime example of what that should look like. Also, to really build a pipeline, making sure that at scale, kids in the K-12 system are directly connected to those learning and opportunities, registered apprenticeships and careers. That can be done, by the way. There's infrastructure to do that, but it's very important. We can do the same thing and are doing the same thing with returning service members, where they automatically are pulled into a system and can leverage their skills. And the same can be said for those underemployed adults, people that are just out there working 2 jobs to pay the bills. They're actually building skills that can be leveraged. And I could give you stories upon, actually Indium's here today. I'll use a quick story on Indium. So there was a gal at Indium who was a barista at Dunkin' Donuts. Could never get a job at any type of facility like that. And because, I mean, she was a team leader. She trained people on the customer interface system. She leveraged those skills. Bottom line is through the registered apprenticeship, the program that we work with MACNY on our GAINS program, Growing Apprenticeships in Nanotechnology Semiconductors. She excelled, not only went through the apprenticeship, but she ended up being tagged as a group leader. I think she's actually beyond Indium now. But that was a fast track, and you changed not only her life, but generations to come. Regional considerations, strength, facilitation by region. This is general, not here. So you can map that. This is a national slide, right? Facilitation by regional intermediaries, partnership, development, and collaboration, employer stakeholder engagement, employer education collaborative course development, investments in facilities and programming, state and local government funding, regional ambassadors, and passion. So you're not, again, why are we here today? Now, some of the challenge, and this is not necessarily this region, this is broadly, the challenges that we often hear and see. Education training courses and enrollment, getting more people aware of and actually take advantage of the training. And then the throughput of those programs, how do you get more people through them, right? Complete education pathway integration at scale. How do you truly leverage the public education system, the education system in general, so it's automatically part of what happens, right? Increasing the pipeline of career seekers, more interest, more access, more motivation. Actual connections between those individuals and careers at scale, leveraging all of the infrastructure. Fragmentation of efforts. Oftentimes, people recreate the wheel, right? And you don't know if you don't know what's out there, you just dig in and you start doing it, right? Identifying existing resources. And really, there's a lot of other things, like do you have enough instructors that are qualified? Transportation, different types of support. And I know that you all have received funding and you're tackling components of this, but the right side is what we focus on and how we help regions and states to address those. So just a summary of some of the key features of a national strategy. So that's leveraging those national, or I'd say external investments and resources to support regional activities. Knowing what they are, how to leverage them, how to leverage expertise, knowing where it exists. Collaboration and leveraging those existing assets. You really, if it's available, taking full advantage of it. And by the way, oftentimes there's no cost associated with that. If it's something that you're funded to do, it allows you to take the funding and actually use it for deployment or outreach and engagement. Advancing skills-based learning and hiring, we've already spoken about. Promoting the broad development of the transferable skills, creating scalable and sustainable infrastructure, and really focusing on substantially bringing more people into the pipeline. Look at the investments that have been made here. I'll just call out a couple of those. So local intermediaries and local industry support for developing those scaled programs. It's not been done any better than it has been in New York. Think of the Empire State Development investments, and Hope Knight will be on a panel a little bit later, and we'll be talking, I'm sure, some of that. New York Creates, I had mentioned. Bob will be able to talk about that if he's willing to share your insights on what investments that have made. It's mind-boggling, right? I think about the DEC building on the corner and what's happened since then. And then employers and universities and colleges, how they support programs and infrastructure development. The National Talent Hub, I'm not going to go into detail. You can go to our NIT.org and sponsor programs, National Talent Hub. It will give you a review of that. But that was developed in partnership and a leading role played by SUNY Poly at the time. But Bob Gear has been intimately involved in that very unique infrastructure developed here in New York, now being leveraged around the country. Mohawk Valley Community College was a key community college representative, making sure it met the needs of educators and individuals. And Global Foundries was the main employer to make sure it worked for employers. And again, it's now being leveraged across the country. It does house dynamic versions of the advanced manufacturing company model found on USDO's website, which we redesigned and maintain, as well as the semiconductor competency standard, which we developed and maintain. But it fully facilitates curriculum alignment, course certifications, that pathway alignment I was talking about, current education mapping, seamless connections between training providers and employers with registered apprenticeships. I'll just mention I mentioned the apprenticeship. This is not an apprenticeship program like an apprenticeship. It's a model of a program. So and this was first piloted at Global Foundries before it was registered, and it was the first one in the country to be registered by MACNY, by the way, as a group program sponsor in CEG. And that's the program being scaled. It's in 27 states now. There's almost 9,000 people in 27 states in it. We have about 138 employers involved, but it's unique in that where we may be more involved early on, we're less involved over time. If you have someone if you already have a group program sponsor like MACNY, they know how to administer a program. Our work is spent on developing work process standards, more curriculum development. So from a Micron perspective, we work with Idaho Manufacturers Alliance up in Idaho to stand it up. We have their program as a national program sponsor in Virginia. But in New York, MACNY no decision has formally been made, but they're positioned to be the group program sponsor there. I don't anticipate a lot of involvement there because Micron can leverage what they've already known, what they've already created, right? And MACNY's very experienced. However, the Talent Hub infrastructure, our expertise is just there if you need it. I'm not going to mention a lot on this slide, but really that collaboration also led to the development of the program. That was not some entity outside of the region. It was developed in New York State. I think we're just about out of time, and I'd like to move into the panel now. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. If you would feel free to come on up, the whole panel, and Chuck. Dr. Charles Wessner. So we have two great panels today. One, we're going to look at it from a policy perspective, federal, state, local, and also Department of Defense supply chain, their views on policy and investments. And then we're going to follow it with a panel on workforce development practitioners, the ones that are actually in the weeds. And then after that, we're going to have a roundtable where we all can have a conversation. So I'm going to introduce our moderator for this panel. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Charles Wessner. He is a senior advisor to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a research professor at Georgetown University, and a board member for NIICA. He's known nationally and internationally as an expert in innovation economies, and his life's work has been in shaping workforce and innovation strategies. Together with Tom Howell, who actually is with us today, also actually published the first comprehensive study on the Nano Hub in New York. And so I think this panel's insights will be very valuable. And Dr. Wessner, it's yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure for my co-author, Tom Howell, and I to be back up in New York. And it's a pleasant place, but we really didn't come for the beaches and the sun. But we're here because it's one of the most dynamic regions in the United States, not always appreciated, by the way. And I'd like to echo our CSIS director, Dr. Shiva Kumar, that why are we here today? We're here because we're a group that focuses on national security, and you are a huge asset to the national security of the country. And we need to learn how to do this better. And there are best practice lessons. The topic is important, but you have been uniquely effective in terms of both regional development and workforce development, and bringing now assets that would not have existed without the efforts, particularly of the Empire State Development Commission. When we did our research on the book, it was sometimes amusing. People would want to know, as for the CHIPS Act later, why you would give significant public funds to a private entity. It's a pretty simple answer. The semiconductor industry is one that you have to pay to play. Mm-hmm. And there are some. There are very virtuous, orthodox economists in countries like Australia and Canada who argue that you really shouldn't give semiconductor companies sums of public funding to support the massive costs of their development. And you know what? Australia and Canada don't have semiconductor industries. So you get to choose. And as you heard from Mike, the 60,000 jobs that are being created are, in my view, a very good choice. So we are privileged to have a panel of doers here, people who pass legislation and people who are able to implement it. And I would point out for Mr. McMahon that the doing at the local level is sometimes the very hardest part. It's however unlikely it might seem, I used to play football, and that last 2 yards can sometimes be the hardest part of the whole game. So, but we have, and I want to, particularly coming from Washington, a special honor to be here with not one but two congressmen. And John Mannion, I have no doubts you know. He is the congressman for this region. But he's been a very active player in education and workforce and for workforce development. And I'm particularly pleased that he's had hands-on experience in both with the unions and in one of the hardest jobs in the country, that is high school education. And there's also a man who I've admired for many years, Congressman Paul Tonko, who interestingly represents the Capital Region, and where we put out our, I think appropriately named book, A Regional Renaissance, which talks about the major changes that's been done there. And having worked at the National Academy of Sciences and Engineering along with Dr. Shivakar for many years, he also has sadly the exceptional qualification of being an engineer in Congress.
Rare species.
Yes, a rare species.
On the Hill.
And I learned from several presidents of the Academy of Engineering that engineers take a very pragmatic approach to things, and are some people, economists like to explain what the problem is and why nothing can be done, but the engineers like to solve problems and do so. But we're very pleased to have him here, and there's also, we're privileged to have Hope Knight, the president and CEO of the Empire State Development Commission. As you no doubt know, it leads the economic development efforts. And I would add, it leads the successful economic development efforts of the state of New York. Young as I am, I've been following this for about 25 years, and I have watched with ever-growing pleasure and being impressed at the persistence, the quality, the scale of the investments that have been made. And I genuinely congratulate you, madam. It's a remarkable accomplishment. And as I was saying about the last few yards, we are privileged to have Ryan McMahon, the county executive here, who has played a pivotal role, as I understand it, in bringing to earth one of the largest investments in semiconductors. I was called by your local newspaper when the investment was announced, and they asked me what I thought about it. And I said, well, you know, there's good news, and then sometimes there's very good news. And then there is spectacularly good news. And that's what you have. I said you will, in 10 years, the region will be transformed in the most positive ways imaginable. And we've seen that in Global Foundries in Saratoga. A great quote from the book was one of the local leaders saying, you know, the town is just bustling. We've got hotels full, new restaurants everywhere. The cars are running off the lots. There's housing construction is booming. We don't know what those guys do over behind the berm. We're not sure. But the short answer is, as Professor Moretti of Berkeley has pointed out, is that the money from these jobs has to go somewhere, and it goes in what the economists correctly call induced employment all across the region. It does lift all the boats. So, and anyhow, with that as a background, oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot my colleague and chair of the NIICA Board of Directors, Melinda Woods, who again shares the quality of being an engineer, again a very useful one, but she brings a unique national security perspective. She was the senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense and directed implementation of the Defense Production Act and has focused on supply chain readiness for the U.S. And I think she's ideally suited to connect these local and state efforts with the defense capabilities of the United States. And sadly, we have moved, as some of you may have noticed, into a world where those defense capabilities have become distinctly more important than they perhaps were just a few years ago. So the questions, so I can stop talking here and talk to the experts on the table, around our table, is could you describe briefly, we'd like to have a brief 5 minutes from each of you, keeping in mind that's already 25 minutes, of what you think of the investments that have made so far, and what you think is unique or most important about them. Importantly, we'd also like to talk, I mean, you're serious people, and we're here to talk about what is working, what is needed to keep it working, and what might be a longer-term vision of what we need to do. Keeping in mind Dr. Shivakumar's penetrating remark that the states and the region authorities in this particular environment need to step up like they have not necessarily had to do in the past. So let me start with you. On the I'm sorry, protocols here. I've got two congressmen.
I don't know about that.
No, we do. Sir.
Well, thank you. You know, I do think the county executive would really be a great place to start, honestly. And I'll take my 5 minutes here and say what I need to. You know, I want to start with, and I will include the county executive on this, that you talked about the great news that happened. Well, the county executive and I, lifelong residents here, it's more than that. It's more than that here, because we are an area that has a great history in technology. My grandfather came here because there were already people here, and after he fought in World War I, he got a job at Franklin Automobile, where the air-cooled engine in a luxury automobile, airplane engine in a vehicle, was made right here in central New York. Then we watched the devastation that happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when we lost our major manufacturers. And this was a place where you could walk out of high school and get a great job. So, you know, I've got a lot of people to thank, and I'm going to focus on Micron. And it really starts with Ryan McMahon, the county executive. He had a vision. He knew the potential. We had great partners in Center State and otherwise, and that would not have happened. We would not be having this conversation if it were not for Ryan. But also if it were not for President Biden in the White House, if it weren't for the supply chain dynamic that was existing at that time, if it wasn't Senator Schumer as the majority leader, if it wasn't Governor Hochul and Hope Knight being in a position to understand the relevance of the time and the necessity that we all work together at all levels of government, despite party affiliation, to do what we need to do. This guy loves this place. I love this place. And he made sure that we were going to catch the biggest fish we possibly could. And we were well positioned to do it. If you look at our K-12 schools, you look at our community colleges, you look at our higher ed institutions, and you look at the private partnerships and companies that are already here, there's really, I'm probably stealing Ryan's words, but there's no better place to do this than right here. And everything had to work perfectly with the timing, and it did. And if you didn't have strong advocates that were going to push and make sure we got it done, we wouldn't be here. I'm going to go to the state legislation that had a tie into chips and science. We only had a couple weeks left in legislative session where where ESD and the governor say, we have this green chips legislation. Without it, we can't tie into chips and science. And we need a perfect program that is going to make sure that the investment happens right here. And sure enough, we got it done. And it was just a few months later that on this stage, I believe, Micron is announcing that they're choosing Syracuse, New York for the largest private investment in the history of this country. There's other things that have happened. In the state legislature, when I was there, even though enrollment was down, we made sure as a legislature that we provided a floor of funding for our community colleges so that it's not just the ones you listen, but also Cayuga Community College is involved there. I was just there the other day opening an advanced manufacturing facility, training facility. And then when it comes to MACNY, we have, I'm proud to say that I carried a line on them in the state legislature that we more than doubled so that manufacturers can take a chance on people and people can take a chance on a career or changing a career. And our technological background and our strong leadership and strong partnerships in the area are what really help make this happen. So I'm proud of all of those things, but I want to talk about the challenges. We need these partnerships. And what we're experiencing are threats to funding for our community colleges, threats to research and higher education, threats to our business partners abroad. That was not on the slide. And I ask all of you to be partners in making sure that this amazing partnership that occurred to make sure that for the best interests of our national security and certainly our economy, that you stand with me in making sure that all of these great things and necessary things that are happening come to complete fruition. I thank you for giving me the time to say so.
Thank you. Very well said, Congressman.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone, and what a great opportunity to look at the human infrastructure. That's an incredibly important component of moving forward and making certain that this vision is brought to its fullest outcome. I'm also encouraged because this has been a very unique approach to growing the semiconductor industry in New York. We started in the middle with state government. Back in my days when I was in the State Assembly serving as chair of the Energy Committee, it was a great opportunity for us to look at dividing the map of New York into certain tech zones that would include investing in the semiconductor industry and nanotechnology in the capital region. And advancing that effort gave us somewhat of an edge when it came to then developing legislation in Washington. And rather than having it flow from Fed to state to local, we are now supplementing what was done previously at the state level in New York, a great coming together of academia, of business, of government, making certain that we had that synergy that would be able to plant the seeds for this sort of innovative approach to our economy. Then when now I had served in the federal government in Congress, the opportunity as a member of the Science, Space, and Tech Committee and Energy and Commerce to have some good placement, to be able to be part of the team that wrote some of the legislation, including our Chips and Science Act. We were very involved with the House version of that effort, then merged it with the Senate thinking to develop a $52 billion investment in this industry through the Chips and Science Act, which is still a cornerstone piece that really moves us toward an industry that is not just about innovation, but about soundness of job creation that speaks to our national security and to our competitiveness in a global economy. So those are important factors and dynamics that really underpin us in this effort. To look at the results of that, to know that we were able to do historic investments, the amount of money that was raised or leveraged from the private sector, I believe, is about $112 billion, which is a phenomenal investment to date that was leveraged through several participations, including the $7.5 billion that went towards both Micron and Global Foundries combined. So those are good installments that should motivate us to continue to go forward. And with the state's contribution and its efforts with NanoFab, a reflection of $10 billion, again, another installment that is very important. And the one that really, I think, pleased me big time was because of working on that effort to have a Chips and Science Center. The National Semiconductor Technology Center landed with an $825 million investment that comes into the nanotech campus in the capital region that I represent. So very encouraged by these signs. And to my congressman friend here, John Mannion, we love having him on the team and great sharing the I-90 corridor with him. We have now got to continue that progress and make certain that the flow doesn't stop. We need only to go forward and upward. There were some challenging statements made at the joint session of Congress by the president, and we need to make certain that as we move into reconciliation and into that budget development for the next fiscal year, that we make good use of the examples that we can now share that engage us in a battle that really allows for chips and science to continue to be built. We even doubled the budget at NSF for this activity so that they can continue research and international collaborations that are important, and also a $200 million investment that goes towards the furtherment of infrastructure, human infrastructure. So, you know, these are specific skills. Even when you look at the trades, I've talked to plumbers that work in the Global Foundries effort, or electricians. They need to take that basic skill and hone even greater specifics that enable them to work and work well in that capacity. So there's just a growing sense of economic revival with these investments. We need to continue the pattern to make certain that we don't lay low in our investments and tarnish our vision. And we will continue to be a sound voice. I know that John and I and others that we serve with in the Democratic caucus will continue to maintain this forcefulness to make certain that in a bipartisan fashion we go forward. I am certain that in the makeup of Congress, both houses, both parties, there's bipartisan support, bicameral support. We just need to let the leadership know in the country, let the White House know that we're serious about this, we're there, full steam ahead. This has been transformational. It has been terrific. And, you know, creating jobs is some of the best work that we can do, providing that climate that creates jobs, a lot of it coming from the private sector, but installments, deep installments of investment are important. And so, you know, as an engineer, as you indicated in the introduction, that's music to my ears. And to see what started at a state level that got corresponded to by a federal investment now gives us this great leverage where we are showing leadership in the nation and certainly become very competitive in the global economy.
Well, thank you for that. All I can say is that your desire to continue and deepen those investments is music to my ears and anyone who's interested in continuing the success.
Well, you know, if we're going to be a world leader and if we're going to be successful, we have got to invest in infrastructure, from all sorts of infrastructure, the physical components, the research investments that are infrastructure-based, and certainly the human infrastructure. So it's a multifaceted approach that needs to be taken.
Well, and although there's certainly things we don't want to emulate from our Chinese friends, their investment strategies and infrastructure are clear to see. I mean, talk about transformative.
Yeah. And a good partnership with our friends at the state level, with Governor Hochul and the legislators. Yes. This is a golden moment.
Well, indeed, you're living on the I-90 corridor, which was at the time something of a daring investment, and you're not far from the Erie Canal, which was Clinton's folly at one point, but transformed New York and indeed the Middle West of the United States. I mean, these public-private partnerships, these levels of investments are transformative, but they often come back to where the buck stops, at the county level.
Yeah. So first off, thank you for being here. Welcome to everybody who came from other communities, and congratulations to all the partners in the room that have really shared in so much of the success that was highlighted on many of the slides that we saw from Mike. I think I'm going to look at this from couple different perspectives because I've been involved in this process since 2019, really 18. But this is about competing and winning from a macro level, competing and winning for the most advanced technology in the world with China. And by doing that, we can stabilize the planet. And so when you look at that and you bring it down to the United States, it's about competition still. It's competing and winning, state to state, community to community. And so when we went through this site selection process, and when it started from the White Pine Business Park story, which is a county-owned mega site that we created, we started out with President Trump and Governor Cuomo, and we ended up with Governor Hochul and President Biden. And so we went through this process, and what we learned in site selection is to compete and to win, it came down to three things, and there was different things in those three things that are as important to execute on, because we have to replicate the strategy. It came down to a site that had unique capabilities to produce the power, the water, the wastewater, the land. It came down to a community, and when I say community, really it's about a community that has the ability to develop talent, recruit talent, and retain talent. And then it came down to money, right? And so, and money meaning that the United States government needed to compete with Asian investments, state government needed to compete state to state, and locally we needed to compete locally to locally. And I do want to highlight, and Kevin's here, and Kevin would be proud of this, that Onondaga County has billions of dollars in this. Arguably, we have more money than the federal government. It's just in a different form. And so when you look at that, how did that happen? What happened was we had a bipartisan site attraction team that literally worked daily on this from the federal, state, and local level, with the goal of landing an investment that would change the course of lives in our community, as John was alluding to. If we never invented air conditioning, we'd still have about 20 more million people living in New York State. The reality is, to get that done, you need investment in sites, you need investment in infrastructure, you need to prove to a company to make their company's biggest bet that you could develop the talent here, you could recruit the talent here. That involved bringing in regional partners and Northeast partners in higher education. And then it involved a commitment to invest by all levels of government. And when you did that, you won. You won a big announcement. So now here we are on the execution side, which is much harder, by the way. And so the execution side is we have our mega site. We have to go through environmental review, the most rigorous environmental review in the history of the United States. And we're making significant progress on that. But that's the hardest one that's ever been done anywhere in the country. We have to invest in, at the local level, $2 billion worth of infrastructure projects, in water and wastewater specifically, but that will position this community in central New York to compete for high-tech manufacturing for generations to come. And by competing and winning here, that will make it easier to compete and win in the Mohawk Valley, in Western New York, in the Capital District, which has a nice cluster today. And then it comes down to the workforce investments, the topic that you'll go through, the work you're all doing. But it's also going to require the alignment of government leadership. And so that's going to be a challenge, right? Because we just went through a federal election. That always gets the blood pressure up. My job as an executive is I have to work with everybody, no matter what party they are. The voters give me my partners. But the reality is we will need the president. We will need the House. We will need the Senate. We will need the governor. We will need the state partners. And I will need local partners. Because just like we did in the selection process, we are going to have to continue to invest in infrastructure. We are going to have to invest in people. And the next key national security challenge will be repatriating the supply chains of the semiconductor companies here. And not just repatriating those companies. We'll have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do that. And in New York, we need to win. We need to beat Arizona. There's reasons why we should. We need to beat Texas, and there's reasons why we should. But they're going to have to repatriate their supply chain, right? And so these Asian gas and chemical companies and material supply companies, they get all their supplies from China, right? That could be problematic as we're trying to create this. They're going to have to find new supply chain partners in Canada and Mexico and Central America, Greenland maybe, all these different things. And the reality is we have to be aligned. And I think this is one of the good industries and one of the great initiatives that can bring the political spectrums together. And it's our job at the local level is to remind all of our partners, no matter what party they are, of the end game. And the end game for us is that we will create the Central New York Semiconductor Cluster. And to give you an idea, just with Micron, John referenced it, we've lived through this process. 9,000 direct Micron jobs at the 2022 payroll numbers is $972 million of new payroll in Onondaga County in 1 year. That's not construction, that's not supply chain, that's not tooling, that's not community growth jobs. That is what changes childhood poverty, jobs.
Well said. Very well said. I congratulate you on that. Let me turn to perhaps one of the people who has had more impact on this than many would recognize. Again, my compliments on not just your intent, but your sustained effectiveness. It's really quite remarkable.
Well, thank you, and great to be with so many partners. So great things are happening across the state, and these historic investments in the semiconductor industry really has created an unprecedented need for talent. So, that is our focus right now. And the state has reimagined workforce development in the context of a demand-driven model. We are focused on the employer and the employer's needs. The state has invested $550 million over the last 3 years in workforce development. In one case, it is standing up the Office of Strategic Workforce Development, which is focused on servicing the demands of industry, as well as supporting the potential trainees. We want to make sure that they are supported in a way that can get them engaged in the workforce. We're looking at folks that are underrepresented, disadvantaged, unemployed, and need a way to get them into the workforce. So I want to provide those supports that are buttressed around training so that they can access employment. Our policy framework, which was talked about, the state's New York Green Chips program, was crucial in getting Micron here. And that program had several requirements. It requires that Micron invest in childcare, internships, and support community aspirations. As a part of the Micron commitment, there is a $500 million community investment fund. And this community investment fund there is a community engagement committee that is a part of, we have community-based organizations, about 300 of them were involved in this process. About 12,000 individuals were involved in the process of prioritizing community desires and aspirations around workforce, education, community investments, and housing, because housing is a very big part of this. The governor has also advanced several other initiatives in her current budget to support semiconductor growth and support. She has advanced a tax credit that will incentivize semiconductor companies to train and hire employees. As we all know, it's very expensive to train in the industry, and to provide support to lower the costs of training, I think, is really important for the industry. The other thing that the governor is advancing in this budget is providing tuition assistance, or actually no tuition, for adult learners who are interested in high demand careers. And so those are two areas where we believe, if we get these items approved by the budget, will really help advance training in the semiconductor area. And then the last thing I'll mention is that everybody talks about on the stage this incredible collaboration that happened to get Micron here. it was, it was a moment we all worked in concert. And I believe that with respect to training and workforce, we're going to have to create the same combination, because it's going to take all of us together to make this happen and to get the workforce and the pipeline that we need to match the demands of the growth in the semiconductor industry we expect to see here in New York State.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Those are encouraging themes that we'll come back to in a second, but let me now turn to the chair of NIICA. And
Absolutely, absolutely. I love everything that's been said, and I think what I want to do is validate a few things. I wear a few hats. One, of course, is obviously the chair of the National Institute of Innovation and Career Advancement, NIICA. But you all have touched on some of the national and international considerations that I spent more than a decade working on behalf of the Department of Defense, which ultimately meant working on behalf of the country. So I want to validate the importance of the work that's done in this region for national security interests, as well as for technological advantage, as well as for economic development. So I'm going to step back, and then I'm going to bridge that to, you all talked very specifically, and of course we understand the importance of a lot of the political work that's being done, but we also talked about the operational piece. And so I'm going to bridge that to working with an entity like those that are in the audience and a NIICA to demonstrate how national assets can help be leveraged and help to accomplish operationally what needs to get done as well. So that national, regional, state level collaboration in operation happens largely with the folks who are here, and certainly is the mission and vision of NIICA. So I'm going to go all the way back. You mentioned manufacturing. It's interesting because sometimes I have to remember that I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and started in the automobile industry. And so we've kind of been here before, right, in many of these different sectors. And that's where I started. My first internship, as we're talking about apprenticeship, was at Pontiac GMC in Pontiac. And we watched kind of what has happened to the automobile industry and the steel industry, and we can go on and on and on, right? And so I was attracted to microelectronics, and so I was an electrical engineer, and I was pursued advanced degrees and went into Intel and Motorola and did that work, and was fascinated by the transition from some of the historical manufacturing environments to what is high-tech manufacturing environments, and how the public related to it. And so we talk a lot now about even almost a public service announcement that needs to be done around AI and semiconductors and things, so people to understand the importance of that technology. So that's a big part of what we're doing too in these workforce development programs, right? And a big part of what the Institute is doing. So I got the chance, and I came out of industry doing that work, to go right into representing the United States at the Wassenaar Arrangement, which determines the export controls that are put on microelectronics in particular. I was the lead for that sector, working with the 40 nations that do that. And in that conversation, we talked a lot about our own US manufacturers, which I had come from, essentially training up Asia-Pac and turning over some of our most important assets. And in some ways, that's the know-how. And to people who then we weren't able to get kind of the same service from. And so it became a problem that we created, acknowledged, right? And also, at the same time, the United States government, DoD in particular, had a fab itself and was producing products and had gotten out of that business. And we had become clear, and we still are, that the commercial industry was going to be how we had to maintain. And so what was happening here in New York, SUNY Poly, the conglomeration of manufacturers working together, tool vendors working together to put together the most bleeding edge, state-of-the-art set of research and technology development, the Department of Defense and government recognized only after some things happened, right? The Trusted Foundry was purchased, Global Foundries, Mike Russo himself helped to negotiate that novel national security agreement so we could continue to have access. I led a study as to what would be the access after that, and then we came and visited. And Mike helped put that visit together and saw the assets here and actually ultimately partnered with you all in that effort. New York Creates, I think, is running that now. So that was a recognition of the infrastructure side. And it is absolutely clear for us in the Department of Defense that we were looking at the IMEX of the world and the Fraunhofers of the world. What we had is the asset that you have here. And so now I'm saying, not only did you lead that, if we look at the work you're doing in workforce, you're also leading in that way. And this is how we demonstrate leadership at a regional level, but leveraging national assets that you've talked about, which will, I think, become a part of the conversation as we talk about the political spaces as well. So I think as we talk today, we'll talk more about the regional players that are a part of making this all work, executing and operationalizing, and NIICA's right there to support, and will be, again, a national asset that can be boots on the ground, that has the expertise across multiple areas, whether it is apprenticeship, program building, policy making, the infrastructure piece of the National Talent Hub, to bolster the work that's getting done and demonstrate the success of that.
Awesome. I think that's as usual, those are extremely important points and capture some of the main themes. I would just echo, as I would point out, a pro bono member of the board of NIICA, that one of their advantages is that and this is particularly true for Washington, they're actually executing here on the ground around the country. Whereas the government, at least when we had a government and where they were doing things, were making awards sometimes by the same department to try to figure out how to do this. And, you know, I'm a friend of government, but there are times when someone needs to tap them on the shoulder and say, that's what you did last year, now they're doing it. And there are reasons sometimes to try and capitalize on an opportunity to make, to reorient budgets in the best possible way. And crucially, and I think it's very important you mentioned about learning. I mean, that's one of the main themes of this. And one of the achievements of the Obama administration, you'll have to forgive me for not criticizing them, but actually there were achievements. And they were willing to look around the world and learn from others, looking at Swiss and German workforce development programs, which remain viable models, and looking at the Fraunhofer system, as you mentioned. I was very impressed when we did our research that Albany had actively studied the Fraunhofer model, whereas many times in Washington, at least a decade ago, when you said Fraunhofer, they said, Fraun what? But the rest of the world knows what Fraunhofer is, and with good reason. We still have that, for example, with the Manufacturing USA. We put in $1 billion for 5 years. Fraunhofer puts in $3.5 billion every year, but that's because they're a smaller country. You know, so these are lessons to be learned. But one of the things I'd like to take up that I think is important, and especially with this group here on, you mentioned the worker training, and I wonder if, I spoke to a president of Siemens USA and asked him if they were using their superb internship program from Germany here. And he said, yes, we do that a bit, but in Germany we get all kinds of support from the government to do that, and here we don't. And you know, corporations are corporations, they're not there. So one question might be, are there opportunities at either the state or at the federal level to provide, you know, it's great to say in the CHIPS Act that there should be child care and so on, which we defended and believe in, although most of those companies do that anyhow, I would point out. But the internships, and having a way to fund that, having a way of connecting university professors. Just a quick anecdote. I was once talking in the Czech Republic about the importance of universities working with corporations. That was not a welcome idea. Those are two distinct spheres. And I said, well, you know, if you you have Microsoft just down the road here in Bruno, and you teach software development. Maybe the people in Microsoft know about software development. It's possible, wouldn't you think? And it's also an opportunity for the internships. So would any of you?
I want to quickly, I was just at SUNY Poly. I'm embarrassed I didn't say that 2 days ago. And you've got that public-private partnership that's there and functioning. I mentioned the community colleges because we need them to be nimble and carry out these stack credential programs. And they're doing it already. And we're so fortunate to have them in place. Our K-12 institutions are doing it as well. All of that is really happening. And myself, I do sit on Ed and Labor as a committee. And there is an emphasis on the apprenticeship program there. So I look forward to working, with my colleagues who chair the committee on the other side of the aisle to make sure that we make that a priority and bring it to fruition.
Yeah, it's great to hear.
And I would also make mention that the fine-tuning as we go forward here is going to be very important. We're all hoping that these contracts, at least in New York, are secure with CHIPS and science. But then there's also the nuances of the child care that was made mention of, and these tech programs, the internships, the apprenticeships. That could be just language that becomes negotiated out as we go forward. So we have to be very cautious to make certain that we not only maintain those, but we grow them, because the filtering into the education process of this whole industry is important. And it begins in K through 12. So what we do in education as a dynamic here or in Washington that trickles down to here needs to reflect that. The awareness of the job opportunities, the specific trades or skills that the students are going to have to acquire need to be translated into real strong dialogue with our pre-K through 12 arena and with higher ed. I'm really fascinated by the fact that we've been able to set up a nanotechnology degree, the first in the country at Nanotech campus. That's part of SUNY Albany. That is a great way to start introducing this and growing curiosity from students that will perhaps choose this career path. But it all begins with that investment in the human infrastructure, in education, higher ed, making certain that we continue that commitment from NSF and through education, however it lands in this discussion. Threats today to discontinue the Department of Education. So we have to make certain that as that remodeling of education as a dynamic in the federal budget is done with the nuances of creating that human infrastructure for this industry.
And our Green Chips program requires internships. So these companies have to establish internships in accordance with our incentives. And I look forward to seeing more registered apprenticeship programs, which will help support this effort.
Are there other incentives, and I love incentives more than requirements. Are the incentives in place to get this done? Are there things that can be done at more of the local level?
Yeah,
county level?
well, I think overall, if you look at the strategy, we have built up a workforce development infrastructure from really in early childhood, even before K through 12, all the way through research and development and various degrees of partnerships here. The first countywide STEAM school in the state of New York, really a center of excellence for kids looking to go to high school that know what they want to do. And there's direct partnerships with Micron, with TTM, with Saab, with Lockheed, with Amazon there. Look at OCC, we put in local dollars, the state matched us, Micron matched us, Clean Room Simulation Lab. Here at Syracuse University, big reason to invest now, right? This is driving investment by other private sector partners. We partnered with Syracuse University, we put $10 million in locally. They're investing over $100 million for advanced manufacturing, curriculum and programming to deliver more engineers, but to really do research and development on semiconductor processes that collaborates with what CNRI Creates is doing. So I think overall, it's all there. The governor's on-ramp program that Hope talked about, and the first flagship facility here in Central New York that Center State's running, focusing on adults, right? We need to get to, we aren't having as many kids. We got to get more people in the workforce in underserved communities, whether it's urban, rural, single moms. We got to engage these individuals to get there. So I think it's happening. I think each year, as long as there's the opportunities in front of us, I think those partnerships really will test the course of time as we move forward.
Well, we're running out of time here, sadly. But if I could ask just one really simple last question. How can we reduce the regulatory burden that you were mentioning coming up? Sometimes I think our environmental regulations, no matter how well intended, act like they're benefiting our competitors rather than ourselves. And I would.
Can I touch that real quick, because we're the lead agency on this, and so I think this is an area where we can get the current White House in the game. Is that not necessarily for the fab we're studying now with Micron, because it's almost too late, but for moving forward and for the industry. But you have to find a way to streamline these projects. These are national security projects. To make the technology, we're in a race. It can't take 3 or 4 years. It can't. And so at the federal level, I think we want to be responsible, right? We don't want to. We have Onondaga Lake that we spent $1 billion cleaning up because we had a corporate citizen who wasn't responsible. But the same way, there's ways to streamline that and to use common sense. The Indiana bat is doing very well. We find it everywhere we are in Onondaga County. So for an endangered species, it's doing well. So I would say that, and I think the one thing, Hope sort of at the state level too, that's an area that to expedite and to be competitive. I was just with the site selector who did the Micron deal. And the number 3 issue that site selectors are now looking at when they have companies was not number 3 4 or 5 years ago, and that is environmental regulations. And so we got to streamline, we got to use common sense, but I do think this is the area we get the current administration in Washington in the game, because that's how they can put their stamp on a lot of these projects.
I would just say, I compliment NIICA for doing what they are doing, bringing that collaborative feeling together, that comprehensiveness that's so important. Whether it's New York Creates or our community colleges or MACNY, whatever the players are here that are so vitally important to growing that human infrastructure, we need, again, to speak as a force in New York of the industry, people coming together and suggesting, here's what we can do the best in terms of reforms. Having input from the industry is a good start, and then go forward with a scalpel, not a chainsaw, and do the reforms that we need to do.
Well said, particularly for the scalpel. Again, there would be much to discuss, and I, on behalf of NIICA, would just like to thank you all for taking time from very busy schedules to spend a few moments with us. From an analytical policy perspective and CSIS, the continuity that you've had here, the sustained investments, the marvelously bipartisan approach you've taken across a dozen, well, not quite a dozen, but 6 or 7 governors over the years, with each side complementing the work of the previous governor, is really a model for the country, and I mean that very sincerely. We need to do more of that type of thing, and I think being able to address well-intentioned but malfunctioning regulatory systems is something we definitely need to look at, and I think you may be right. This administration offers. And also the growing sense that it has national security implications. This is not just do you want a green planet or not, it's do we want one that will be protected by our maintenance of it. So alas, we need to stop here, and we're going to take a 15-minute intermission before we transition to the next panel. But there'll be an opportunity to have some refreshment and to network a little bit, although I don't think I need to tell congressmen how to network. But in any case, thank you sincerely. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Hello. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to panel 2. It was really great to hear the perspectives of the policy panel. And I do think the theme of collaboration and working together and having that long, the long view, what it really takes to land these strategic investments is really important. But you could spend all the money you'd like if there's no people to actually man the facilities, to pursue the jobs. The passion has to carry down to those folks. Before I get started, I just would like to just take a moment to mention someone. So I mentioned MACNY being a very close partner here in New York State, and they just this week lost a workforce development specialist, Jason Poole, unexpectedly. And he was a young man with them for about 6 months, but he brought passion, and he was doing the outreach, the engagement, and really learning the ropes to help to establish these programs, working with employers, et cetera, on the registered apprenticeship side. And I think that, his family and children should be proud of the work that he did. It's so important, right? And we are in a national, international stage, so I just want to acknowledge him for his work and his passion. The other thing I think we can learn from that is oftentimes the unsung heroes are the ones that aren't overly paid. It's not people that are in leadership positions, but the folks like workforce development specialists that are out there pressing the flesh, helping to identify the services and support that's needed, and really making it happen. So I just wanted to start the panel by mentioning Jason. Now, today's second panel is really focused on the practitioners, the people that actually are doing the work to build, establish programs, programming, really doing training, education on multiple levels. And so I'd like to introduce our panel here today, and starting with Nicole. And of course, this isn't going to be in right order, so I'm going to have to move this around. So Nicole Almeida, she's from the Capital Region BOCES, and with a career in technical education. Albany, the Capital Region BOCES, they actually represent, this is about 24 counties, and 84,000 people have the ability to raise their hand and say, I'd like to pursue some training at your CTE center. So they've been really instrumental in aligning curriculum with the needs of industry in the area. We've worked with them, and I think Bob is still here from our team, Robert Weinman, but really helping. You've stood up. Not only are you running a great center, a CTE center, and you can talk about your work, but one of the other themes is how do regional stakeholders put more skin in the game to help other regions and pilot things that are helpful even more broadly nationally. And I'll say the Capital Region BOCES stepped up. When we launched the first career opportunity hub in the country was launched in New York. We launched that in June of 2023. Capital Region BOCES raised their hand and said, we're going to work with you to leverage the National Talent Hub so all the students in the target programs have lifelong learning profiles in there, and so they can get credit for what they've learned to expedite their career track, and to leverage what they've learned to more expeditiously complete registered apprenticeships or get qualified on jobs. So the system allows those students to seamlessly transition to employers that have their job profiles in the system. They get credit for what they've learned there for competency-based registered apprenticeships instead of hours-based. So it's value to the employer, a value to the individuals, and through the work of Capital Region BOCES, that's being scaled across the I-90 corridor throughout the state, but it's actually going to be scaled. It is being scaled throughout the nation. So thank you for everything that you do for the greater good, and thank you for your work, Nicole, at the CTE Center. It's a great center, so great model. And then Jackie McDowell from Indium Corporation. Indium is a global leader in materials manufacturing for electronics and semiconductors. They're an active participant in our Gaines Registered Apprenticeship Program sponsored by MACNY. And Jackie really brings that on-the-ground experience to recruiting, training, and developing talent for advanced manufacturing sector. And if you think about Indium, I'll say a couple of years ago for the Employment Training Administration National Conference, the Vice President's or the First Lady's office reached out, and she wanted one of our apprentices from somewhere in the country to introduce her. So we put forth 3 candidates, and one of those introduced the First Lady, but one of them was from Indium. And I'd mentioned earlier about the barista from Dunkin' Donuts, the young lady that no one in her family had ever pursued degrees or had graduated from college, and she was really the first one in the tech sector. So She has her picture with First Lady, and that's Indium. But also the work that Indium's done in working with MACD and with the community college, MVCC, et cetera. What we try to do in the panel, just like the first panel, think about federal, state, local, and then national perspective. We're looking at it from the I-90 corridor. The two congressmen that were here today really bookend the region that we're focusing on today, Syracuse to the capital region. And if you think about our panel here today, Mohawk Valley Community College, sitting next to Jackie, has been a key partner in the development of that, that part of the I-90 corridor. And I'm going to say Dr. Jake, right? And the reason why I'm going to say Dr. Jake is because recent PhD. And he said, just call me Jake. And everybody else is going by the first name. I mean, that's a huge lift, and he should be. We'll call you Jake after this, but I wanted to make the proper introduction. All right.
Appreciate that.
But Mohawk Valley Community College was really instrumental in the development of the Talent Hub, where Tim Thomas, who's now at Griffiths, actually was the lead for Mohawk Valley throughout the entire development phase, which was funded by NSF. Actually started during the first Trump administration, was funded by that administration. But he was involved to making sure it met the needs of the community colleges broadly, educational institutions more broadly, and students more broadly. So there's another example of not only are you doing good work that you're going to elaborate on, here in the ecosystem, but that was, again, unselfishly for the greater good. So thank you for that. Let me just a little bit more here. So. Basically, your current role, you just started this year, correct?
Correct.
All right, so kind of new. Maybe Tim is gone and Jake is the new Tim. You also are one of the providers in the state. I mentioned a network of providers for related technical instruction in the state. You are actually, you and Hudson Valley Community College were the two in that networking now, and you saw a slide earlier. We have many institutions throughout the state, but thank you for your work there. Also, Bob Gear from New York Creates. And I mentioned earlier about the many iterations of that enterprise. So Bob has really spent years developing and delivering programs throughout the SUNY system and really supporting CNSE, SUNY Poly, NIICA. When was NIICA, Bob? That was...
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And that was really starting with megatronics and providing foundational skills for semiconductor industry and beyond, NSF funded. And now really playing a key role in the Northeast Regional Defense Technology Hub, the NORDTech Hub, DoD Hub, and the CHIPS EUV Accelerator that I think Congressman Tonko mentioned earlier. And you're also actually, you're the first registered apprenticeship, CompC-based, under our Gaines program, but the first one of its type in the country at a commercialization fab, R&D fab, anywhere. So really that learn and earn model to open the doors to get more people involved in the operations and maintenance of the fab. And then last but not least, Clay Nagel. So Clay spent years at Global Foundries. He spent a decade there. He led a global technical training at Global Foundries. He spent his entire life really in training and manufacturing environments, but he also came over and joined us a little less than a year ago. He now leads the National Center for Skills-Based Learning. So all of the infrastructure programming that we provide to regions, et cetera, all falls under Clay. So without any further ado here, let's talk about foundationally what we'd like to discuss here. So talking about successful workforce models, what are the keys to success in meeting the needs of employers and meeting the needs of individuals pursuing degrees from your individual perspectives? Now, Clay, I know that you have a NIICA hat on, but it would be great if you could really even speak to it from Global Foundries as a kind of an employer perspective would be great, because now we have, both the I-90 corridor covered on both ends. We also have CTE. We also have community college. And Bob, you're multiple hats, multiple investments, multiple roles. You're kind of unique in being able to speak to it from more, from a very diverse background. The other thing about is how do you scale? How do you define success? How do you achieve success? And how you scale success? But from your perspective, right? So with that, I'm going to start with Nicole. And we've talked a little bit about what you've done, and I'm sure I haven't covered everything,
No, that's okay.
but you have free license to.
Okay. So just a little background for career and technical education. We're built on the foundation to provide students a pathway for a career, whether it's through apprenticeship or a career with Indium, Global Foundries, New York Creates. So career and technical education, we just, through curriculum and everything, that is our foundation. Through Capital Region BOCES, we have advisory boards of local business partners, community partners, to align with industry standards to make sure our students are a step above the rest, make sure that they're getting those industry skills and abilities that prepare them to be, what's the word I'm looking for, be more valued on a resume. We also at Capital Region BOCES, like me and Jackie were talking about earlier, we host our business and community partners on campus just to provide that real insight into the industry as well as the employment opportunities that are available for them. Whether it's in a small group setting or a large group setting, our students are hearing from the businesses firsthand. Personally, from my perspective as a school counselor, the students hearing from the business partners or the community partners is super beneficial. They don't want to hear from me, they don't want to hear from the teacher, they want to hear from the person that is working in that trade day in and day out. So I think that that is probably one of the most foundational things that a student can hear from. And then also, to toot NIICA's horn a little bit, in the last few years, we've expanded our reach through NIICA and the National Talent Hub to connect our students with the local and national job opportunities through the Talent Hub itself. That has just helped them build their confidence so much in the abilities that they learn through our BOCES programs, just to show that when you're learning the machining and manufacturing curriculum and the skills there, that they actually have the confidence and the skills they learn through that program to apply for a technician position that maybe they never would have thought would be possible for them in the future.
Yeah, so it sounds like one of the most valuable components is the direct interaction with the employer.
Absolutely. The collaboration, just the welcoming and supportive environment, just to toot Robert's horn a little bit too. We do bi-weekly meetings to talk with our local business partners, Global Foundries, New York Creates, Hudson Valley actually, just to talk about how do we continue to make it better. How do we continue to support our students from when they leave us to when they go right into industry?
How well do you connect directly from, first of all, two questions. One, how many adults are in CT programs versus high school students? What's the breakdown?
So for my position, I solely see 11th and 12th grade students. We do have adult programs that are available. I would say we probably have 10 or 12 adult education programs. For the high school level, we have over 30 programs available for our students. Our enrollment last year was about 1,200, and we're continuing to see our numbers expand. Currently, right now, we're in construction, building an extension center to help alleviate the wait list a little bit for our students.
And how many of the students that really want to pursue a career with one of the target employers, what's your success? How many of them actually get placed?
I would say majority, and I want to attribute that to our work-based learning opportunities. Almost all of our programs have multiple work-based learning opportunities that allow them to get into industry, as whether it's a job shadow or an actual on-hand learning experience. So I'd say majority of our students do, before they even leave us, have a job offer.
Great, great. Well, thank you, and we can get back into some other questions, but to move down, you mentioned the importance of employers, so it just so happens to your left is an employer.
Yes.
And we're talking, more middle of the I-90 corridor as well. So Jackie, I know that you're very passionate about skills-based learning. We've talked about it before, and how, that maybe opens doors. You were one of the earlier registered apprenticeships that we've established in the state. I know that you've worked closely with MACNY. For those of you that might not know how it works with sponsorship, so employers can sponsor their own apprenticeship. Sometimes they already have the expertise to do that, sometimes they don't. We encourage that, and we can get them up to speed and help facilitate, get them trained up. In other areas, we always recommend investing locally. So we recommend that the companies, the employers like Global Foundries or Micron, et cetera, invest locally. Build your capabilities locally. Invest in the intermediaries locally. So we find places where there's not a group program sponsor. That's where you can leverage the the economy of scale. One entity could sponsor many programs. MACNY is a group program sponsor and intermediary. In some areas, someone says, I'd like to be one, but I don't know. We can train them up and get them up to speed and establish programs with them. MACNY already was mature, not the way they are now when we first started working together, but they already had it down. They had the system down. So the role that MACNY has played, and you could talk about working with an intermediary, how that goes, right? We can also sponsor national programs for employers that are in multiple states. Oftentimes they'll want a national program. They can work directly with us. Or we have a hybrid model, which is unusual, where because we recommend that entities invest locally, we can actually, for a company that wants a national program so they don't have to work with the different states, we can actually say yes, but then subcontract the local intermediary anyway, so they can still do the work on the ground, boots on the ground, still get the funding from the employer, et cetera. So we have multiple ways to do it. In this case, Mohawk Valley Community College works with MACNY and Indium. So Jackie, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience, what you see as working, what has gone well for you, and don't be afraid, if there's ways we can improve, now's the time.
Perfect. So thank you for the opportunity. I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but I have minutes. So I'm going to try to cram some humbleness in here, right? So we knew nothing when we started apprenticeship, and it was this word that was scary. I am not going to lie about that. And it was something where we didn't know where to start, but we had this amazing relationship already built with MACNY. And so it was one of those things where we knocked on the door and said, help us, please, because we want to do this, we're scared to do this, and we're not exactly sure where to start. And for an advanced manufacturing organization that has it together, it's pretty scary to say, I'm not really sure what to do when I need help. So we built this on curiosity. MACNY made it less scary. They are the administrative experts. And so we really relied on them to tell us what to do and where to even start and how to do this. And then it evolved, right? So MACNY gave us all of the weeds things that we needed to do. And we followed their direction, and it was perfection. But we also were blessed that we were in a community that has an amazing BOCES program, that has an amazing partnership like MVCC. You mentioned Tim Thomas. Could not have done it without him. He was boots on the ground with us and really held our hand and gave us bravery. So MACNY, MVCC guided us on what we needed to do because Indium is unique in the best possible ways. We try to do things and field things outside of the box. So quite frankly, we didn't want to do it as pre-entry into coming into work. We wanted to do an apprenticeship as a token of our belief in our employees and use it as a retention tool. And so that made us unique out of the gate. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I would say to anyone that's scared or contemplating doing this. Don't be scared. You need to lean on your partners, and you need to be curious and not try to fit a mold. So we have constantly evolved the program. When we first started, and we are constantly tapping in and asking wild questions, and MACNY entertains them all, so thanks, Mike. But one of the things we did was we tapped people on the shoulders and said, hey, we think you could be a great candidate for this. And the look of pure terror on our employees' faces was like, wait, no, I don't do college, like, no. And we're like, no, but we believe in you. We believe in you, we want you to do this. And so our first cohort was one where we tapped them on the shoulder, and they embraced it and knocked it out of the park and really set the stage. But that opened the door for us to realize that we had many employees that wanted to participate in this, and maybe we should do it more like an interview process. And so, hey, apply for your apprenticeship and tell us why you want to do it. And that gave a whole nother level to it, right? Like, well, I want to do it, but I don't know, college isn't for me, and I don't think I can do this. Or, you know, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I came to manufacturing sort of just to earn a wage, but I didn't know that this would be my career. And so they went through the application process and they were chosen. And that gave a whole nother level to it. And you know, the other piece that has been amazing, and we could not have done it without collaboration, is the fact that we had a new cohort for a trade, our tooling and die trade, that didn't match our needs. It didn't match what we needed or what we could do for our employees, but our employees were hungry for it. And so we went to our partner, MACNY, and said, what do we do? Because this trade doesn't exactly fit what we need. And MACNY was like, no problem, we got you. We got you, we'll help you through this. And they helped us through working with the state to modify the trade in order to meet our needs. And it was no easy task, but it was doable. And it was all because we just weren't afraid to ask questions. And then for the MVCC component of it is they never tell us no. They are always saying, yeah, we can do that. We can make that work, no problem. No problem, Indium. Tell us what you need. Tell us what we need to do to build your educational toolbox. And so we give them ideas and they're like, oh yeah, we have a class for that. Or, oh yeah, we can absolutely help. So we are blessed with partnerships. I don't know that it's like that everywhere. I hope that it is. But being courageous and not feeling burdened are honestly the ways to get this started. And having partners, great local partners, great national partners like NIICA, though that's the key. That's the key to success. And this has been hugely successful for us. We are on our 8th cohort. We have 5 registered trades within our group and counting.
And counting.
Yeah,
smile.
and counting. Yeah.
A couple of nuggets from there. When people that are not used to, not college graduates or never been really recognized for anything, they just go to work and get training, but they can't really leverage it anywhere. When they find out that they can actually get a federally recognized credential and someone's paying attention to them and looking about, because they're already, in this case, they're already incumbent workers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that you have new people, but I'm talking about the incumbent workers.
No, we use it for incumbent workers.
Okay.
It's definitely retention for us right now.
So just to see the lights go on and be passionate, that's something to be said. The other thing I will say that you said, I hope it's that way everywhere. It's not that way everywhere. One of the things that we often have to work through is sometimes colleges, and I'm not mentioning where, what state, anything, but there are times where colleges really try to advance their programming, their degree programming. It's hard to separate that, get into skills-based learning. And what we try to help those entities understand is that because everyone's struggling for enrollment, and the natural inclination is to sell degree programs. But in fact, if you're going to address that long term, you need to build a pipeline, a broader pipeline of people that would not necessarily pursue those careers or those degrees. Once they get in, if they want to advance their career, your pipeline is now bigger on the career side. But we do struggle around the country getting some colleges to actually meet the employer's needs and the individual's needs at their level. It's often not what's on the shelf. And I will tell you, and I'm not just saying this, Jake, because you're here, but they are progressive, they're forward-thinking, and they don't hit you with why they can't. No. Their attitude is, yes, we can, and what do we need to do to make it happen? That is not always the case. Another strength of the region. And with that, I think we'll move into Dr. Mavic. So I'm going to say Jake after this, but okay, because I know you said. So from your perspective at MVCC, really you've advanced in recent years to supporting talent pipeline development many ways, many programs, many investments. And if you could talk about what you see the college's role in ecosystem development, opportunity, talent pipeline development, and obviously feel free to talk about registered apprenticeships. We're very interested in that as really the heart and soul of skills-based learning. But more broadly, and I mentioned earlier that you've really stepped up for the greater good, but that's not addressing in any way, shape, or form all of the programs that you've recently you've made some pretty substantial investments. So why don't you talk about that, how you see the role of the college and how you're actually implementing those programs to meet that need?
Well, thank you. I think I'll follow up on the concept of courage because traditionally academics can be a little bit rigid. We like to teach in semesters. We like to offer 2-year programs at the community college level. But really, I would say our engagement with the NIICA project and Dr. Geer in our efforts to help build the workforce for global foundries, that was kind of the initiative at our college to say we really need to be as flexible as we possibly can be. And we learned a lot from that. Our faculty developed some curricular elements from that project. And that really built us up to a place where we were able to respond to some new entrants into our local workforce when Wolfspeed and Semicron Danfoss arrived. And so our initiative for them was a 2-week intensive training program that was non-credit. And so it really starts from a non-credit experience that dips their toes in the waters and is a little bit more training oriented. And that, we hope, will tier into a registered apprenticeship that has the coordinated technical instruction. And that's their first experience with more serious academic courses. From there, we have 2 different programs. We have a mechatronics certificate program, which is much more attainable than a 2-year degree. And from there, they can move to our 2-year electrical service tech degree. And so building that stackable experience where we meet the students where they are has allowed us to broaden the workforce pipeline. And we use the word traditional student sometimes, and I'm not sure if there's such a thing as a traditional student anymore. If you think about what everyone has been through and all the different backgrounds they come from in the last decade or so, really everyone has they come from a different place. And so working with our employers to build the stackable credentials so that they can engage with the training and education that they can deal with right now. And they can pause if they would like. And whenever they're ready to move, we have a program that's there for them. And really working with our employers such as Wolfspeed and such as Indium. I will mention, I believe we have a 75-year partnership with Indium. It really is, we're able to build the curriculum that workforce really needs, and that brings some validity to the student experience that makes them continue to come back. So working with McNE on our internships and our apprenticeships, working with our K-12 partners, such as our strong relationships with BOCES that really warm them up to what they're about to enter into. And then that tiers directly into our relationships with SUNY Poly and where they go with our students when they take them off of our hands.
No, that's great. And it's interesting to hear how, as a community college, you've integrated New York Creates, SUNY Poly, but New York Creates, and that enterprise into what your offerings are. So that's an example of leveraging bigger infrastructure, right? Bigger programs that you didn't have to develop, assets that you didn't have to develop.
Yes, and it is interesting how curricular elements and different initiatives move back and forth between the 4-year space, the 2-year space, the BOCES space, and industry and advanced manufacturing. And I would say that's, from my perspective, that's quite unique.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're here today on this stage instead of Washington. Bob, the Dr. Geer, I might add, but that's not a new doctor. That's why I didn't bring it up. But
thanks for referencing the age, Mike.
I didn't tie it to age. No. And actually, full disclosure, we began working together back in the earlier 2000s and actually helped with the NIICA program. But I was the 4th hire for Global Foundries when they formed that corporation. And my role was government and regulatory affairs, but really hard and soft infrastructure development, which includes talent pipeline. And so starting a little, really a mechatronics type course to where it is today, it's just amazing. But I think coming from New York Creates, and maybe you don't know, but that's more of a public-private enterprise spun out of what originally started years and years ago, the University of Albany through its various iterations. And if you look at now, how the state has how the state perceives that asset and what New York Creates is doing directly with industry, and how not only are you providing valuable programs to build the talent pipeline, workforce development on multiple levels, but how that intersects with providing broader programs and infrastructure that are for the Mohawk Valleys of the world and beyond, right? So Bob, you're very, I keep saying you're unique, and it's a good unique, but you say, well, it's been years. It has been, but you've seen every iteration of that. You've watched it grow. You have to write a book. I might be the only one who buys it, but I would buy your book. But could you share a little bit from that really broad perspective of really a little bit about that journey, why it's been important, and what it takes to really maintain it?
Sure. Well, what you mentioned something earlier today in your first presentation, you put it in slides. You kept appending the phrase "at scale" to a lot of the initiatives you're looking at. In other words, you do it once, that's great. How do you do it many times? Across breadth, across many communities, many organizations. And it is a challenging thing to do. And the most important thing is and this was also referenced here, in fact, you just said it, is not to have institutions or organizations be islands, right? It's the connective tissue that makes that work. And I'll give you an example. You just referenced a 2-week training program that NVCC developed for Wolfspeed, okay? And yes, we helped give you a lot of that content, but to be honest, we were told what to do by Global Foundries, because we developed that program to help Global Foundries train more people to come in. And so when you solve a problem once, you don't want to solve it 20 times. And the only way that information, capability, expertise moves from one place to another is by those organizations working together. And I am going to plug NIICA a bit here, because we worked on the program that started it, is a lot of times, when you have a large manufacturer come in, and GF was a great example that really had to, initiate a lot themselves, and you're looking at Micron now. You don't just want one institution, because you're not going to rely on one institution to provide talent, expertise, capability. You want an ecosystem. You want a broad pool. And so you're going to go to partners and say, hey, we really would like if you could sort of move some of your programs in this direction, move your work in this direction. And they could look at themselves and say, actually, not unlike Indian's experience, well, I don't know how to do that. But NIICA has, the Talent Hub has a fantastic starter kit of, well, if you want to upskill people, this is what you need to teach them. And so that's really critical, because that's the type of know-how that can spread from institution to institution. So that really has driven a lot of what we've done at New York Creates, not so much on the skills, but on the capabilities and the infrastructure. So for the geeks out there, we have a number of large clean rooms, leading-edge semiconductor equipment, and that's great for R&D, and it's very good for economic advancement. The third pillar of what we do is workforce development, because we can bring young people, students, people that need to be reskilled, vets, into our facility, in many cases into our clean rooms, to allow them to get those skills. And that's great for us. But to be honest, we benefit most when we bring other institutions in to give their people those skills. The same way that the Talent Hub will tell you, this is a roadmap for what skills you need to be teaching your students. We bring them and give an experience in a clean room, working with our technical staff, working with our facilities staff. I think next week we have a dozen faculty from OCC coming for a workshop. So they can talk to the people from Applied Materials. They can talk to our folks that manage the clean room. And it's that connectivity that really makes a difference. Taking those resources, whether they're infrastructure, bricks and mortar resources, whether they're academic resources, and not reinventing it, but simply scaling it. And without that connective tissue, this becomes a lot harder. So a great example going forward, since we have Capital Region BOCES here, is Emerging Technologies New Visions class, which is going to take place in part on our side and in part at Plug Power. Because if you think, okay, if we work together, we're better at doing. Okay, doing is great, but it does no good at all
if there's not an audience there that wants to take advantage of it. So the other side of that equation is to make sure that all these organizations maintain that awareness, maintain that engagement. If you don't do that, then you've got a lot of interesting programs and no takers, right? So maintaining that type of connections with K through 12, not so that you're not trying to strong arm someone into a career path, but making sure that they're aware that it is a career path and that it's a one that will fit them. And sometimes that's the hardest message to get across, but that's what, what we do, what we focus on is making sure people can come into those programs and see themselves following that career path, because that's a game changer. That means you've got someone that's more interested than just, oh, there's a big white building. Oh, no, there's a big white building and there are jobs in there I can do. And so that's the magic part of it. And then we have the pathway that they can take. And we can say, oh, we'll know exactly how to get you where you want to go. Being able to do that in multiple spots in a region is critical.
So it sounds like infrastructure for the broader use comes in the form of programming, support, and physical infrastructure and you provide it on multiple fronts. So it's the bigger long-term lifts that can be leveraged more broadly in multiple ways.
Yeah, and making sure that the know-how is available for anyone who needs to access it. And I look at educators in K through 12 quite a bit. Once they know where to go, then that makes their lives so much easier.
It makes me think about, we spent about 2 years, as you know, when we were first developing the Talent Hub. We engaged industry subsectors representatives for about 2 years, looking at all the competency models that are out there and trying to determine what's relevant to come up with a solid database. We call it the Comprehensive Competency Standards Database. Went from like 35,000 down to 700 or 800, quite frankly. But then in the Talent Hub, as you know, it's now dynamic. What does that mean? So Global Foundries has their job profiles in the system. And now when your old role, Clay, when a job changed a little bit, right? If there was a different higher proficiency level or a lower proficiency level, or I need it on day one, or you just make that change. It instantly signals the educators or training providers, the colleges or whoever, right? So they can keep up if they choose to with that. But part of that work was developing all the knowledge, skills, and abilities. We focused on semiconductor, but advanced manufacturing more broadly. And so we developed that baseline of work. And all the employers in all of our apprenticeship programs, 138 of them across the country, all the KSAs for those technician roles and beyond are in that system. A lot of work is being done around the country to develop, all the time we monitor it. We need to build curriculum. We need to find out, determine the KSAs that are needed. And that, first of all, that work is valuable in a region because there's interaction between employers and training providers, educators, right? So there's a lot of value in that, and just outreach, engagement, and building relationships. But could you talk a little bit, Bob, if you would, about, because I know we've shared this thought sometimes, it's a little bit frustrating, if they could start with that baseline that's been developed, still do the other work, but leverage that to do it more expeditiously, more efficiently, and get kind of the best of both worlds. How does that happen? Is it simply a communication thing? So how do people know what's even available? How what's your thought on that?
Well, it's communication. It's making sure that students, at least young people, let's stick with students, but it works the same for incumbents or people that need to upskill or reskill, is making sure they understand that there's opportunities, that people see the nature of the job. So I'll give you a very specific example, that when you would walk into GF, all right, let's use that as an example. It'll be the same for Micron. That, I worked with my family. We had some diesel mechanics, so I did some of that. That is some of the single best preparation, a tool tech can have. And so there's just not enough understanding and awareness on that side. And so I think that's the most important thing, because once they have that, then they can start connecting with the infrastructure that's there. And then we sort of move them into the hands of the educators. And with something like the Talent Hub, not to shill for Mike, but something for the Talent Hub, it's an automatic resource where you can go to. So that common baseline of skill is critical, because we might want to say it, but the semiconductor industry is a volatile industry. And so sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. But when you have a workforce that has this broad skill, all of a sudden you have people that can move into those positions. They can move into other positions as other advanced manufacturing increases. So understanding that there's a huge important role for that baseline is critical. And it starts with people knowing that, oh, the skill base that I have actually translates very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we scale across the I-90 corridor with the New York version of the Talent Hub, one of the things we're going to be able to do is anyone that's in that hub, and if any employer actually, if there's a down cycle, the value of that employee and the alignment of skills from their skills profile directly, other employers that needs can pull them right out of the same place. So it's really, Clay, I just quickly, I wanted to talk, if you could put your Global Foundries hat on for a minute. You heard Indium, they use the apprenticeship program for incumbent workers, and I know that you're they were expanding it there as well. But if I'm not mistaken, Global Foundries is hiring most or all. Don't they use that for initial technician hiring now? Could you talk a little bit about how they leverage it? Because that was actually the first pilot for that program was done at Global Foundries before it was registered in the country. So they were the very first semiconductor registered apprenticeship in the country. So again, for the greater good, maybe it was for selfish reasons, Clay, but you don't have to answer that here on you're live. Talk about that, but also how you leverage other resources like the Talent Hub, just if you could.
Sure. So, I mean, a little history. We started as incumbent workers as well, right? We needed to work through the process in a non-registered apprenticeship, just kind of work through the process, work out the kinks because it had never been done before, right? It was just getting it over the hurdle internally in a semiconductor fab is very, very difficult because it hadn't been done. So we worked through it in a non-registered way. But when we got to the point where we were ready to register it, we had some good champions within the business that realized the potential to widen the talent pipeline very quickly. And it was a long conversation, but we started at that point when I was there for the very first time, hiring into what was an entry-level position that was never hired into before. It was actually a job code that existed, but not used. Right? Typically for technicians, it was always got to have a 2-year degree, and you're going to come in at job level 2, right? And it had to be these specific degrees. It was not just a 2-year degree, or it was equivalent experience like military experience, something like that. We immediately took that and we said, okay, we're going to hire into this entry level job code, and we're going to make that the apprenticeship. They come on full time, full benefits, regular employee. It's not they're an apprentice, and then if you get through it, you'll be an employee at the end. So that was a kind of a game changer because now you just said, if you have a high school diploma, we'll put a structure around you with related technical instruction, mentorship inside the business, and we will shepherd you through the process. And when you graduate from that program, you will be promoted to job level 2. That has since evolved to now there's a stacked apprenticeship on top of that. You go from graduating in a job level 2 into the next level of apprenticeship, which then when you graduate from that, you go to job level 3. So it's a career path that has been built there that is transparent from the day somebody says, that seems interesting to me, and based on National Talent Hub, if we go back to like a CTE program, right, at Capital Region BOCES, those students are building a profile and they can immediately see that these skills, I'm this % matched to that apprenticeship. And it's not just at Global Foundries, it's elsewhere as well, but it's eye-opening, right? Because when you see that, then you can say, oh, okay, well, what's my next step after that? My next step is I get the job. I graduate from that. I can see a promotion and a pay raise. Where do I go from there? Oh, there's another thing I'm going to go into from there. I can see a promotion and a pay raise. And they know, here's my next 5 years, right? My next 4 years, depending on when you drop into the cycle. But it's an eye-opening way of doing it. And I'll say the vast majority of the technician hiring that's going on at Global Foundries right now, and again, I haven't been there in almost a year, but I'm still very close with the folks there. The vast majority of the technician hiring that's going on that's direct hire into Global Foundries is going through apprenticeship at the moment. And it's either, folks are coming from a different walk of life who are underemployed. It's folks straight out of CTE programs. It's folks coming from the community college who, hey, they got 1 year under their belt, but they're really looking for a learn and earn opportunity. So they find that, and then they continue their degree program, but they can come in as an apprentice. It brings in all walks of life, and it's always interesting to watch and exciting to watch how not only you're getting somebody into a career that they didn't think they could be in, but the life-changing moment it is for them, right? If there's somebody who is underemployed and suddenly now there's this opportunity for a generational change, right? When they come in, so it's something I'm very passionate about, obviously, and that's why I moved from Global Foundries to NIICA, so I could do this more broadly. But yeah, it was definitely a journey to get through the process there.
Well, I think we're out of time, so I think it's time to close. First of all, I'd like to thank the panel here today, but really both panels. But I think one thing we really can agree on is that there's no single organization or company or entity that can make this happen. It really does take collaboration. And it's always nice when big employers come in with the dollars and people really focus on them, because they can be the shakers and the movers. They can be the catalyst, the anchor tenant in the store, if you will, right? But we really do need to focus more broadly. I'm going to just, a couple of points that I think were raised that are worth just kind of summarizing. So first of all, strategic investments matter. Federal, state, and local resources really have to be coordinated on all levels to really make it happen. Collaboration is essential, and that's public and private partnerships, workforce intermediaries, education systems, working together, aligning programs at multiple levels, very, very important. Sustainability is key. It's not just about launching the programs, but we actually have to make sure that we can sustain and really scale them, right? And New York State in this region is a great example. Ryan was talking about it earlier. The congressmen were talking about it. On a policy level, it doesn't make any difference what flag you fly, right? The bottom line is you work together and you take that long view. Talent pipelines have to serve everyone. We really need solutions that work for small and large employers, the whole supply chain, not just semiconductor companies, not just the big players. And you notice Micron's here today, but they're not on the panel, right? Global Foundries is, Clay, you are, but because they specifically say it's about everyone. It's about collaboration. And I'm not speaking for Micron, but I know that's their belief. Also, New York's model is really setting a standard. You know, I showed that map earlier. You saw all the dots in New York, right? New York's getting it done, and the I-90 corridor's getting it done. We're really looking forward to what the future holds and working collaboratively with you all, supporting as much or as little as you need. But it's just exciting. I'm a New Yorker. Our office is in Hanover, Maryland, but I'm really excited to see this. Before I close, I just want to make sure that I say that for those participating in the Manufacturing Stakeholder Roundtable, which is kind of around the corner from here, it's at the Bizignano Grand Hall, which is literally around the corner inside the same building. It starts at, be there by 12:55. We're going to have a networking lunch, so please feel free to press the flush there. And if you're not invited to the panel, there's room to still come and sit in the periphery and to witness it. So Sujay, who opened the event today, our partner from CSIS, will be moderating that panel. And then I think that's it. I just want to thank you all for your passion, for everything that you do on all levels. Thank you for coming today. I know everyone's busy, and safe travels. So thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Nice job.
That concludes today's event. Thank you for joining us for this important discussion on semiconductor workforce development. We appreciate the engagement of our distinguished speakers, panelists, and attendees. Please stay connected with the NIICA and CSIS for future events and updates. Safe travels, and we look forward to continuing this conversation.